Perhaps all men were created equal, but all objects certainly weren't. In fact, objects are only equal to themselves. All other cases, objects are not equal even if they have precisely the same values. On the other hand, primitives are equal if their values match. So in my example there, the string cat equals the string cat. It's not the same instance, or it's not the same string, but they are equal. There is some confusion to do with equality in JavaScript because JavaScript provides two sets of equality operators. There's the equals equals operator and the equals 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 operator. And the difference is type coercion. The first, and you might say default, set of equality operators, equals equals and exclamation mark equals, attempt to coerce the two operands into the same type before comparing them. And this is generally a very bad thing to do. So the common recommendation is never to use equals equals or exclamation mark equals, and instead stick with the triple equals and exclamation mark equals equals operators, which will not do the type coercion. So it prevents a class of error that occurs when comparing two objects that represent the same value but have different types. So for example, if you said the number 1 equals equals a string containing just the character 1, the equals equals operator would say that they are equal, and the triple equals operator would say that they're not. That might be confusing, so let's look at an example. Okay, first example. I want to show that objects are in fact equal to themselves. So I've created an object called Joe, which has one property, name, with the value Joseph, and then I'm outputting Joe equals Joe and a Boolean test that the Joe object does in fact equal itself. When I run that, we see that Joe equals Joe is true. And that's great. Now the other side of this equation was that objects are not equal to other objects even if they have exactly the same values. So I'll create another object, this time calling it Joe2, and giving it the same property, name, with the same value, Joseph. And this time I'm going to output Joe equals Joe2 and a Boolean test that the Joe object is equal to the Joe2 object. I run that and we can see that Joe is not equal to Joe2 because the output is false. And the reason that that's happening is that the fact that these two objects have the same contents and are identical, they're not equal because they are in fact separate objects. If I change one of those objects, it's not reflected in the other. Primitive types, on the other hand, they behave differently. We can compare two separate primitive objects, and if they have the same content, the same value, then they're equal. And we can show that here by outputting this Boolean test, the string apple equals the string apple, a separate instance of a string but with the same content. Have a look at that. We see that apple is equal to apple. If the contents are different, apple equals cat, then obviously we would expect that that would be false, and it is. The same thing holds for numbers as well. If we check the number 16 is equal to another instance of the number 16, it reports that as true. The inequality operators are just the reverse. So here we're testing that the number 1 is not equal to the number 2, Obviously we expect that to be true, and it is. As mentioned, the equal equals default equality operator is a dangerous thing to use because it coerces the type of the values that you're comparing. So obviously we know that the number 1, numeric 1 here, is not in fact equal to the string 1 because one's a number and the other is a string. However, if I run this example using the equals equals operator, it incorrectly tells me that the number 1 is equal to the string 1. The reason this is bad is that it introduces a whole class of bugs, including this one here that I've included for an example, where I'm testing whether the empty string is equal to the number 0. There's really no way that we could consider that those two values are equal, yet when we compare them with the equals equals operator, it will tell us that they are equal.